Conscious Endeavor by Henry David Thoreau. I know of no more encouraging fact than the unquestionable ability of man to elevate his life by a conscious endeavor. It is something to be able to paint a particular picture or to carve a statue and so to make a few objects beautiful. But it is far more glorious to carve and paint the very atmosphere and medicine through which we look, which morally we can do to affect the quality of the day that is the highest of arts.
Thank you so much, Bob. Henry David Thoreau. Welcome to everyone to Gems from the Wisdom Traditions, a conversation circle. And I like to stress that word conversation. It gives a certain, I think, informality and invitation to all to participate. We're lifelong learners and we all have something to learn, and each of us has life wisdom to contribute. We're very fortunate today for our theme of self-transcendence to have Fariba Enteshari joining us. She is the founding director of a nonprofit organization called Rumi Educational Center in Santa Barbara, California, where she is right now. And she's an educator who teaches the master epic of Jalal al-Din Rumi. Some of us just know him as Rumi, a 13th century mystic poet. And she teaches both in her native language of Farsi as well as in English, which you'll find she's extremely adept in as well. And she, every week, translates a piece of Rumi's writing and puts it on her website as a quote for the week. And many people study with her to really come to understand the Sufi tradition at a deeper level than is normally available to any of us, including people from interfaith communities. I'm going to let you tell the name of the book. I'm afraid of mispronouncing it. But before I hand it over to Fariba, I want to just mention that when I asked Fariba, what is the gem from your tradition of Sufism, Rumi's Sufism, that you would like to present to us at Gems? What is the gem? In regard to this topic of self-transcendence, she shared with me that it has to do with knowing ourselves well. And this is the opportunity that Rumi gives us, all kinds of insights into knowing ourselves well, and hence being able to self-transcend. So Fariba, let me hand it over to you.
So good evening and welcome to our gathering. I'm happy that you are here. Today was a gorgeous day here. It was just jolting to see how beautiful it is, everything. And it's a wonderful day also to share some of the wisdom of Rumi. I know this is a gathering for us to be able to just have a conversation. Today, I will just start to share with you the poem that kind of brings everything together. The Alchemy of Love. You come to us from another world, from beyond the stars, and a void of space, transcendent, of unimaginable beauty, bringing with you the essence of love. You transform all who are touched by you. Mundane concern, troubles and sorrows dissolve in your presence, bringing joy to ruler and ruled, to peasants and kings. You bewilder us with your grace. All evil is transformed into goodness. You are the master alchemist. You light the fire of love in earth and sky, in heart and soul of every being. Through your loving, existence and non-existence merge. All opposite unites. All that is profane becomes sacred again. So this is just the path of transformation. It's the path of alchemy because it's the path of transformation. And Sufis relate themselves to al-haq. And al-haq means the truth. So in order to look at what is our relationship to the truth, we need to understand the word of Sufi. And Sufi practically is the seeker of the path of the truth. Is someone who is seeking and searching for truth. And what is really important for us today is everything that Rumi talks about has something to do with our inward journey. The inward journey toward the truth, toward the meaning. As the crown of creation, we have this thirst to be able to understand the meaning of life. And in order to understand the meaning of life, we need to understand ourselves. And in order to understand ourselves, we need to just put attention to our inner senses. Rumi talks often about our physical senses, our 5 physical senses, and our 5 inner senses. So in order to understand in a big picture what they talk about, what the Sufis talk about. And by the way, you can be Catholic and be a Sufi because you're really searching for truth. You're tireless in your search. You can be Jewish, you can be Muslim. It happened that this ideology of Sufism flourished within the Islamic, as the mystical dimension of Islam. But the journey has to do with the journey of the heart. And whoever is kind of non-stop in understanding the tangible and intangible, the manifested and the non-manifested. So in Quran and also within the Sufism, we have Bashar. God created Bashar, Adam, and Adam and Eve, they look like us. But in order to become a perfect human, we need to ascend in some level in our qualities and to function from our highest self. So the lower self, the lower ego, which is the kind of animal domain, we get fearful, we have fight and flight system in us. We just reactory in that, in the motto of being human, whatever pushes us, we know what to react. And this is no thought basically involved in it. That called nafs. And that's a really big discussion within Sufism. But basically we relate to the world through our 5 physical senses. And we experience the world, we use some of our rationality and our mind, and then we create a personality with it. And that's it, I happen to believe it's not hard to take care of our livelihood, which is in some level ironic, but I see a lot of people figure out how to live their lives, to have enough food and shelter. But it's harder for us. It's not like, smooth path to start searching and looking for this higher quality within us. What is really in this tradition important to say is that plural form of nafs is nafis, which means nobility. So it almost like when we polish our lower qualities, when we discipline our 5 physical senses and relate to the world with more attention, intention, and just in tune into the fiber of life, like really good scientists, we have a way to see the metrics of these higher vibration, which is called here nobility or nafis, basically. And there is, like, by paying attention and training ourselves, there is one way to be able to achieve certain higher quality. All of this is important in the relationship to the absolute, truth, and reality, which is, you know, the name of God in Sufism. It's truth. And help us to go to the awakening. That's like very in a nutshell to the concept of it. I chose one of the images that Rumi talks about in his poetry, just to make it too easy for us today, is Rumi calls us clay house because we are made of matter. So, and our spirit is the light. So one of the images he gives us is that we are the lighthouse. When we let our higher quality, our spirit quality, illuminate, when we polish them, it becomes a lighthouse. And a lighthouse can guide anybody. So we are the stars and we come from another world is illuminated somewhat in that also. As Renee mentioned to us, Masnavi is the masterpiece of Rumi, and he calls it Pele Pele ta mulaqat Khuda, step by step to meet the God within us, and is a master epic, is full of storytelling, and is very self-reflective. So within each image, Rumi teaches us what part of us is this image. And after a while, you have the language of your own soul, because you have all these images and knowing yourself. And he uses basically, his tool is storytelling and the poetry. But poetry is a form of free spirit language, is the language of the soul. And through the poetry and the images within poetry, he communicates to us how he can and we can take our own hand through the verses and like rank by rank, learning, you know, what branches we need to leave behind, what branches we need to polish, what qualities we need to adopt in order to get to a higher station of our being while we are on the earth. This is really the central idea of Sufism. They know once our soul and our spirit departs, goes back home to the source of the souls and spirits. So they talk about it in that way, Jana, which is the plural form of spirit, which of course we don't have it in English. So that's really important for them, that while they are on the earth, they not only acquire, but also practice this godly quality. This is something I really concentrate a lot about. So it's, we are the seeker of the path of the truth within our heart, with searching. Tangible life is not enough. We always push forward to understand more about the complexity of life and who we are here in this moment. And love and wisdom are the other sources he used. Basically, one complex things together. Of course, is a path of transformation. And the social justice part of it is very important for me. So I left it in this diagram because it's all about balance. Is he really cared about how much is enough in every situation. One of the categories, and here is the category Rumi focus on, that they use Attar before Rumi, also use the same Shahr-e-Esh, the city, the 7 passages of the city of love. And here is translated the 7 stages of enlightenment. So within the 7 stages of enlightenment, this is what Rumi had included into the stories of Masnavi. The first stage, he didn't write anything about it because it says either you are a type of human being that is searching and digging and is acquiring more wisdom and knowledge, or you're not. If you're not, even Quran mentioned it, the material life is enough, and have fun. Nobody will hold it against you. But if you do, the first step that you would like to walk into, the first stage, is love. And as you see, I just translate love as love, but for desire to know, for talab, I translated thirst and search. Often they mean more than what we say in English, so here you have it in one table together. Marifat is a type of knowledge that is all-inclusive. So it's a knowledge of all, science, wisdom, knowing all together. It's become marifat. You acquiring to learn about everything, like Theosophy school does. So istighna is another one, hopefully all the knowledge you acquire take you to a place to understand for yourself, as Renee mentioned, to know yourself and know how much is enough for you. So you come to contentment. It kind of giving it a goal, what contentment is after you acquire it, to kind of searching to know while you are alive. And then Tawheed is the unity. Hopefully it helps you after you say, okay, let me make sense out of all the knowledge that I have. Let me rest here and see how can I practice and seek unity. So this is unity. And then the second, the last two is just like, I believe it's not up to us. The wonderment when you give it a space comes to your life. And the last stage, which is 7th stage, is Faqr and Fana, which is translated directly as poverty and annihilation. But I love nothingness, because once you become like a tree full of, fruit, and you drop all the fruit, you want it to be uplifted to a place that you can, for a while, to give it a space. And we come back to that because this is is going to be the topic of our conversation. So this is another diagram I came up with. It's important to understand that all these ladder of stages of enlightenment is an inward journey. It's deeper and deeper within. And this is another category that they talk about. So it doesn't matter as long as we can practice love and we can practice the enlightenment. So they categorize it a bit differently, and I like that too. So it's Ilmul Yaqeen, Ainul Yaqeen, and Haqqul Yaqeen. And the first is like, we have a hunch. We really have a little tiny hunch. This is not the life that I was sick. Maybe I am a good scientist. Maybe I am a good doctor, but I'm searching for more. And this more is not tangible. So you have to gather evidence. It's a collection of our own observation and knowledge. And through that, we just kind of one step deeper and pay really more attention to seeing it and experience it. this seeing and experiencing is not anymore with our physical senses only. Within, within our inner eyes and inner heart, we can see the matrix of connectivity and creativity and connection. You have seen a lot of good scientists don't believe in anything and still can find their way into the matrix of all knowing and do enormous, discoveries for all of us, because they so attuned and in tune with the science and the craft that they are mastering, that they kind of can leap into the understanding of a higher elevation to see the whole matrix, as I mentioned. And the last one is dissolving in the truth. It's like experiencing it over and over with each breath, with each inhale and out breath, expressing the whole, the divine within your own heart and being, and feeling connected to everything else. So when that happened, is like, I am happy, which Hallaj mentioned and was, killed for it. You feel your oneness, which we just mentioned in the other category, in unity with the absolute and the truth. So now we come to the practices, which we are going to have time to talk about. Okay, it's nice to have many categories. What do we do as practice? Sufis in this tradition, they really focus on their breath. And you may know about the meditation on attributes of God. It's famous as the 99 names of God, which is one of the practices they do as zikr, and is known also when they do the zikr, they just turn around, and also they can do the sama with it, which is the dancing of willing dervishes. But it's in a stage that you really transcend with letting know that your intention is to leave your earthly quality, drop it, and ascend to the higher quality. And for that, you choose a name or attribute of God. For example, you can choose Al-Haq, which is the truth. You can also choose Yawadud, which is all-loving. So you can go on the internet and type it, and I have Sufi friends that walk, and with each steps that's in breath, they mention the name of God, and then out breath, the retention of it. After a while, they feel their breath is not nafs, is not just working for this world, is connectivity between these and the other world, is the nafis, is the nobility, is the spaciousness that they feel. So all of these practices or anything else, the question mark is, I will come back to question mark, but let me see. Del is the inner heart. So all of it is to polish our inner heart, to polish our inner soul. I'm going to stop soon. Ishq is the essence, is made of love, is love. This is my interpretation about Rumi's teachings of love. Love is the solvent, love is the medium of everything. And this is also something, before I go back to the question marks, something I wanted you to just see and absorb. is جمله معشوق است و عاشق پرده است، زنده معشوق است و عاشق مرده است. I will read it in Farsi again. جمله معشوق است و عاشق پرده است، زنده معشوق است و عاشق مرده است. The beloved is every being, and the lover is nothing but a veil. The vibrant vitality is the beloved, and the lover nothing. but the void. So this is also a path to just kind of transcend our ego and the part of us that is on our way. Do not let us to connect. Rumi has all these verses about love that here is جوشش عشق است کاندر می فتاد. The essence of you, what they put in us, the main, let's say, intangible material that our soul is made of is love. And here Rumi, this is one of the verses of Rumi at the beginning of Masnavi that says, it is the intensity of love that the Creator put in the wine. And the wine is the blood that is in our vein. It can be the love that is in our vein. That's what he believes. So let me go back to the question mark.
Sorry, Bob.
I know I gave you a couple of examples. I can tell you in question and answers about my own practices. It's kind of something that works for me, and you can tailor your own practice. Yes, Renee, I can stop here.
Now, the question mark is wonderful.
Yeah, I wanted us to have time to figure out, how do we transcend? How do we do that? It's good to have categories. I'm going to stop here. It's wonderful to have categories and help and wonderful poems to just be nourished from and nurture our soul. But it's also very important to know when I'm really fearful, when I'm really human, when I am really bound to the earth, what would help me to create this space that the Holy can come in?
Perfect. I think that's a wonderful question for us to toss out for our participants. You've given us so many just beautiful images, words for us to go on. I know for you personally, you have a way of transcending through meditation.
Actually, one image that I love in this tradition is, you may have seen those miniature painting that a beautiful woman with long wavy hair is reaching out to an old man who is almost like that and is giving the man a cup of something. So in this tradition, the woman is God. The head of the woman, like the waving hair, each hair is like our own path to the source, and is reaching out to the old man, which is in this tradition is the humankind reaching out to love, is giving a cup of love, a cup of wine of love to the human race. And so God basically is painted as a beautiful woman with a wavy hair, and each of us have our own path, a special path to the source. But at the same time, they call it John, or spirit, the spirit that is in me, the vitality is John. And then the name of God is Johnan, which is the plural form of spirit. So with your breath, you have this connection, like the hair, your breath, it comes from another world. And you are from another world because you are the holder of the breath, exactly like the lighthouse, that the clay house is holding your spirit, is holding your light.
David?
Thank you, Fariba. That was amazing, as always. I think this is your third or fourth time back with us.
Yes.
You just radiate this love that you're speaking of. Just wanted to call attention to that. Before you got to mentioning the breathing, I was wondering about the physical practice of Sufism. And I was curious about the whirling. With each spin, there's a breath and a prayer.
No, I mean, when they focus on the breath, some people told me that it really helped them to start to turn instead walking. You know, some people walk. The good news is, at least I teach this as an educator, and everybody else that I know around me, there are some groups that have really good the practice of the wheelings. I'm sure there are rules and laws for that and the teaching, but also what is important for us and the people that I was talking about, that they were saying instead walking, it helps them to just stay quiet and turn and turn. And Rumi is also talking about it, that the turning helps him to harmonize with the molecules of the world, with every molecule of the world. You know, it's a particle of the world. He feels that he feels the galaxies and everything. But I think the breath is really like the connection. And with each in-breath, they take the name of God in. And then with each out-breath, like Yah, Hu, Yah, you know, they calling upon God, and Hu is the oldest name of God. And you hold for a moment, and then you say, Hu, the Hu is out-breath, and you take your steps with them. Yah, these are steps, and you inhale. Hu, the next step, and you exhale, until they feel that their breath is connected to the divinity and holiness. So they practice it so much. And Rumi actually talks about it, about the household that he grew up in. It was the name of God, so the retention of the name of God was so emphasized in his childhood household that you could feel the divinity around him. So it's like calling upon, I live here close to a peak of a mountain, and I really can feel, you know, each in-breath and out-breath, if I take 5 minutes to rest or something, goes right to the peak. Because the peak is like a reminder of divinity, and the breath is another. So you keep reminding yourself, and then you are the holder of the breath. So that will, that what we call retention, or by osmosis even, you know, just by intention of practicing the holiness that's within us. This becomes really important for a lot of people to keep practicing it. Yes.
Could I ask a question based on something that you mentioned that I would like to toss out to the whole group? Sure. You mentioned that we have an ego, a lower self with a small s, and then we have the higher self, and all of that is, you know, below the reality of truth. So the self-transcendence that we're talking about, you also mentioned rungs. I'm thinking of kind of going up those three. And so my question for everybody is this: is there any point, does it help us to have an understanding of our lower self, of our lower nature, in order to transcend into our higher self and beyond, into reality itself, or into God? Do you think that it helps us to have an understanding of our lower self?
I've got a quick one. Frank Zappa said, you got to get into it before you can get out of it.
Completely agree. You got to experience it, you know, and you got to keep experiencing it your own way, to become easy to do it whenever you need it. Yeah. That was good.
I have another quick one too. In a planning class I took years ago, there were 3 steps. There were really 10, but 3 steps where am I? Where do I want to be? How do I get there? But the starting step is, where am I? So I don't think you can possibly move on until you know where you're starting from.
Yeah.
Mm, mm. Beautiful. Carolyn.
Well, the lower self is not going to go away
Yeah.
so long as you're alive. So you have to take control of it and give it habits, both for being quiet and all, and also habits for trying to transcend in consciousness. So I think I think that's a big mistake if you trying to run, oh, I'm going to rise to another state of consciousness and get out of this lower self. No, you've got to have, and that's part of what takes time and all that. You've got to have it cooperative, let's say, in your quest for transcendence. That's what I would suggest.
Yeah. That was in the quote we send out. The quote we send out talks about the patience. With patience, you can figure out the joy of going through all troubles. Because while you are here, you will go through troubles and you will be tested. And each time you are tested, you get angry and react. But it's important to be able, and that's, I can say the question mark, and then I have said what I needed to say. The question mark for me is, although I know all these different categories that Sufis talked about, and especially being embedded in 7 stages of enlightenment, and study that in Masnavi, it's really important for us to find a way to be able to elevate ourselves to a space that we know is divine. However, we can do it with focusing on our breath, reading, wisdom stories, any way creating calm. I mean, the most difficult times, I can just leave everything aside and ascend to a space that is basically nothing except spaciousness. But while I am there, I assure you that I feel I'm touched by higher qualities, that when I come down, I can see the same problem completely through different perspectives. And I completely agree with Caroline that we always will be tried in that way. You think you solve something, something else comes up, and then you are in a bad human mood again. So you need to give it a space. And I think spaciousness and emptiness is the 2 things that a lot of traditions talk about, and Sufism for sure has it. And I have benefit of that through the practices.
Beautiful. Mary, I see your hand up.
Aloha kako. Thank you, Fariba. This was just wonderful. I see so many parallels with Jesus. And
Yes.
it's so reassuring and self-affirming that God, whatever God calls you, or you, whatever you call God, loves you, loves each and every one of us, and wants our best for us. As far as the ego and the superego, I think of the Catholic practice of reconciliation. Because yes, we all have sinned, we have all failed, but we don't have to carry that. We can transcend above that. And in the Catholic Church, reconciliation, penance, that is how we get to that better level. We can never forget it. We can never go back and change what we've done, but we certainly aren't going to repeat it. I mean, I hope not, but like you said, and like Carolyn said, I get angry. I judge things that I see that, has no place in the spiritual benefit or the spiritual betterment of myself, but it is something that, we all have to deal with. We're all going to be short-tempered. We're all going to judge. But when we can look back and say that, okay, that was not I shouldn't do that, then we're working towards a better self. Mahalo. Amen.
Oh, thank you, Mary. Bob?
When I first heard of this talk, I was thinking of transcendentalism. We started off with a quote from Thoreau, but there's inside the almanac, on the inside cover, there's another quote from another transcendentalist, Emerson, and it reminded me so much of the first poem you read on ecstasy. And I'd like to read what the inside of the almanac says. It's called Tides of Joy by Ralph Waldo Emerson. The heart of the universe, with every throb, hurls the flood of happiness into every artery, vein, and veinlet, so that the whole system is inundated with tides of joy. The plenty of the poorest place is too great. The harvest cannot be gathered. Every sound ends in music. The edge of every surface is tinged with prismatic rays. And it reminds me that Emerson was once asked to give a talk about Concord, the place where he lived. And he looked at the history, he looked at the people he knew, the leaders of the town, and he knew in his heart that wasn't what he wanted to talk about. And so he tried to find a more original voice of talking about nature. And I think, that may also be a name of God, nature, or what Thoreau called wildness. It's not above us, it's part of us. I remember Rumi once talked about that. The devil came to him and the devil said, "Why do you keep talking about the names of God? God has never answered you." And I guess that's true. And then the angel of the Lord came and said, "Why did you stop praying?" And he said, "Well, he never came." And Rumi, basically, the angel of the Lord said, "Your desire for me, your calling for me already was my answer. It was full and complete where you are." It's like Rumi saying, the whole universe is spiritual. It's that simple. Love infused with spirit. It's just interesting in that tradition too that we find that.
Yeah, your calling is the closest things to you.
And I don't exactly know how I'm going to say this, but there's something about in practices of transcendence that we are getting rid of the ego or getting rid of the lower parts of ourselves. And if we understand that we are all one, that the body is divine, it is the temple of our soul. And it's not getting rid of, but it's honoring and loving those parts that we don't, that we're not, that seem difficult. Instead of getting rid of them, it's like including them in the circle of divine love and including the oneness of all that is. So when many people, in terms of with meditation, which is my form, if you want to get rid of the ego. No, you're never going to get rid of the ego. But what you can do is have the ego become part of divine and live from that place of divinity inside yourself, as well as in your actions and compassion and ways of being. So I think that's an important part of when we talk about transcendence. It's not getting rid, it's including, because we are divine, and our body and our mind and our heart and our soul and our ego and all the junk that we've done, it is divine. And there is no separation because it's all one. Thank you.
It's very, I'm glad you mentioned it, because I make always a note to mention that in Rumi's time, they did separate these things to teach. But as you mentioned, there is no get rid of. It's just our lower ego learns and become more acquainted with the divinity and recognize it and knows its space. So that's why the balance becomes important. But I completely agree with you that in our time, we see the connectivity between our mind, our body, and we do deal with each of them as a sacred and a part of the equation. And it's good to mention it each time when we come together, that doesn't matter how far back we go and how the philosopher of that time, 800 years ago, dealt with it, is important to say. Even Rumi, sometimes in mention, when I say get rid of, it shouldn't be on your path of ascending. It's like a child that learned to meditate. The first time I learned to meditate well, my teacher told me, all the business is like a child, and you say to the child, not now, but you do pay attention to the child later, but not in the moment that you need to make some space for your spirit to shine through. So thank you so much, Diana, to mention that.
Maurice.
Hi, Fariba.
Hi, Maurice.
You mentioned social justice as one of those little major effects or movements. Could you say more about how that kind of connects to self-transcendence or that process? Or at least tell us what you meant when you connected social justice in your diagram.
Yeah, sure. Our higher quality, or we were talking about ego, the lower ego, nafs, and we were talking about nafis, which is the when you basically is a disciplined ego, because we have also healthy, good ego. So the reactory ego is like always what is in it. That's what Rumi basically, based on the images within Masnavi, teaches us. He teaches a part of us is like a donkey, and he call it ass. And he says ass always looks for grass, and certainly doesn't look for grass for everybody. It just looks for everything for itself. So it's like all the time there is a motor in us that says, what is in it for me? If I say come and do this, what is in it for me? But these higher quality look everything from as a whole, and not as what is in it for me as a single person, or what is in it for me in my town, what is in it for me in my country, what is in it for me for this part of the earth. We mess up the layers of the ozone, Australia and some other places pay for it. So to see this connectivity and say, okay, how can we help everybody else, brings the thought form changes to we, not I, collective we. And the collective we is, Rumi calls it, پرسید یکی که عاشقی چیست گفتم که چو ما شوی بدانی. One asked what is love, and I said once you become this collective we, you understand it. As long as you have I, the ego, and separation, you're not able to have access to love. So one of the quality of love that he teaches is all embracing and can focus on everybody's benefit and not just a portion of the society. So it's the social justice for all. And Sufis, they were the gatherer and the people that were usually with the caravan, and in the caravan, they would, they wouldn't have material things to sell. They were the connectivity among all the wisdom and knowledge from one place to another. And to take care of everybody else and not just think about ourselves through the lens of love is very important in this tradition.
Yes, because a lot of time it's easy to meditate, especially if we're angry or something, because we're all on ourselves.
Yeah.
And so I guess sometimes maybe it's helpful to forget oneself and think about others, altruism. Anyway, I just thought that's what you were saying a bit.
Yeah, I think it's good, even if we are meditating to release, our entanglement with something, and transcend to a place that we are touched by the holy qualities or higher qualities. Because once we come back, then the focus is not I, the ego, or I who is hurt or is in trouble. The focus can become all embracing again. So that's the possibilities, you know, as Caroline mentioned, as long as we are here, we're going to struggle. But the form of the struggle changes when we leave the boundaries of ourselves and transcend. I think I agree with you, but also I would like to mention that even if meditation is egoistic, it releases the person, and with the person being less harmful to herself, himself, or others, it's a good quality. Sorry, Maurice. You can focus on others when you're afraid.
I was thinking about in this process of trying to self-transcend, in the Sufi tradition, do they use means such as, in Buddhist tradition, they have the paramitas, trying to instill virtues in oneself, and that's a way of sort of subduing the worst aspects of our lower nature. That sort of thing. So there's Dana, Shila, Shanti, you know, discrimination, detachment, and then stages of meditation, different kinds of meditation. So I just wondered if there's something like that in Sufism.
How I understand it, I think so, because basically you swap one bad quality with a better quality. That's what you are mentioning, right?
Yes, like patience for impatience.
Yes, yes.
That kind of thing, sure.
Yeah. I think especially patience is something that Rumi had mentioned so many times. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting, when I was young and studied all these verses, I thought I never, ever going to achieve any type of patience, because impatience was one of my really good qualities. But actually, I was misjudging myself. He mentioned patience a lot. And it's also in the verse that we send out, because it's so important to love ourselves and be able also to know what is our downfall. I mean, a lot of places in life that I got a free path is because I can really learn from other people's mistakes and my own mistakes quite pretty fast, and it has been very advantageous. So once I did it, I knew ouch is ouch, so I could avoid it. And it's really important to have patience with ourselves. If I went with the young Fariba, thought that she is never going to learn any type of patience, it wouldn't be even possible to teach myself all this wisdom. But at one point I figured out I am wrong. We all can, when we know ourselves, we can create those qualities. We can find a way. We talk about the matrix a lot, and like good scientists having access to it. What is it, the saying? You shall knock at the door and it opens. Mm-hmm. So to identify it and want it to leave it behind or solve it, it's very helpful and a good way to do that. Patient with impatience. Yes. Thank you.
I keep coming back to this idea, and we're so close to being at the top of the hour, but I'm interested in the inner senses. We talk about those qualities of the five senses and our perception, and that's how we translate the world. I'm very curious to know more about the inner senses, and just if you could give a tiny explanation, that would be great.
Very good question coming at the end. All I know is that he talks about 5 inner senses. The rest of it is within the poetry. Is like you have to dive within the verses and see what he's saying. But what I understood, the first level is after our physical senses. And even, he gives us some tips. For example, he says you are like a jar with 5 physical senses connected to the world. And then he gives us a tips. Keep those clean so you can start to work on 5 inner senses. So that's really interesting, because we know if we overload each sense is an addiction. So to keep these clean is very important, our physical senses, to know how much is enough to watch, to touch, to see, to just have a cap on all these physical senses. And then I believe the first one that he's teaching us is the layer of feeling connected to everyone else. And like a flock of the birds, that they know how they move. And this is something we all can do in terms of once you become attuned to and pay attention to the movement, you can feel, it's in your dreams. You're not different. Iraq has a war. You can dream it a couple of nights before, because your universal soul is connected to all other souls. So I call that common sense. Your common sense elevates to the higher level. And then the next is dream. So the dreams become more like, they might be the dreams that you experience right now, but they also show a door to another world to you. And then your understanding and your comprehensive becomes more kind of not from this world, because in between the third layer is the layer that you have enormous imagination. I think, for example, it's true if we say Steve Jobs could see that we can have all these wireless connection and carry everything in our hands. It's some part of it in this world, and then some knowledge of it was in another world, and he could connect that together. That's just not a perfect example, but it's kind of an indication. And then it takes us, the fourth one, it takes us to understanding. And the last one is the supreme rationality, and it's not our rationality, it's God's rationality. So by practicing what the book of Enlightenment of Rumi, chapters by chapters, not that he just kind of throw it in your face and say, this is this stage, this is this stage, but he drums on all these opening, because we do have all these inner senses. So I'm sorry that it's so short, but he touched upon it within those stories and poetries. And some of them are so perplexing that they do drum on these inner senses for us, is inner layer of intuitions that our essence, our spirit already has it. It's just we don't have time to work with it, and we don't. Most of the time we don't.
Well, we've come to that fun part where I get to ask, who is feeling the calling to give a vote of thanks to our beloved speaker, Fariba, who's here perhaps for the third time, I think, presenting with us, and who has brought out so many wonderful points made by our participants. Starting maybe with David saying, quoting Frank Zappa, you've got to get into it before you can get out of it. Roger, where am I? Carolyn reminding us that we have a lower self for our lifetime, so we need to get it to cooperate. Mary reminding us of, or maybe telling us about for the first time for some of us, the Catholic practice of reconciliation that allows us to raise above the mistakes that we inevitably make to get to a higher spot. Bob reminding us of the tides of joy that was really a beautiful mirroring of the gorgeous, gorgeous poem that Fariba started us out with. And then we had a question and beautiful answer from Fariba about social justice and self-transcendence. And Jenny gave us a really good pointer that we do need to think about these virtues. And it seems that maybe as we cultivate these virtues within ourselves, we will actually probably get to having a better experience of understanding of these 5 inner senses that Rumi spoke of. But without those virtues, probably we're not going to get there because we're going to be so tied up in our own selfish little me and all the outside senses, we don't have a chance to open up with that spaciousness that Fariba talked about, to then be able to get a grasp a little bit on these beautiful inner senses. So I gave you some time for somebody to put your hand up and say, oh, I'd like to give a vote of thanks here. I think it's Bob.
No, I think Renee, you just did it. What you just said was it. I mean, who could say anything more? That was from heart and true appreciation. So I think we're done. You did it.
Thank you for the recap.
We stay after a few minutes for anybody who'd like a little more time with our speaker. And thank you all so much. So many wonderful gems that everyone was sparked by Fariba to
Thank you, Renee.